What are the Beatitudes? As Jesus begins his famous Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, he launches into it with 9 statements that are commonly called the Beatitudes. And these 9 statements Jesus makes about certain kinds of people whom he calls blessed. Let me read it to you real quick. It's super short. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. That word blessed is where we get the title beatitude. It's a form of the Latin word beatus, which can mean happy or fortunate. The original Greek word, though, that Matthew uses in his gospel is the word makarios, which is also sometimes translated as happy. But scholar Jonathan Pennington says that there's really not a word in English that perfectly encapsulates the Greek concept of makarios. And also what Jesus seems to be describing here goes beyond our basic everyday definitions of happiness into something else. The statements are completely counterintuitive, like if we're talking about how our culture pursues happiness today. Rather, Jesus says that you are blessed when you experience things that most people would like to avoid. Things like mourning or meekness or persecution even. But notice in English, there's a big difference between blessedness and happiness, a big difference between someone who is blessed and someone who is happy. For us, blessedness describes more of a state in which one seemingly receives favor, like God's favor. Whereas happiness is more indicative of an emotional state, a way of being in the here and now. Now, over the years, there have been a number of alternative suggestions for how that word makarios should be translated. One alternative is the word fortunate, and that's kind of like the word blessed. Another that also comes from scholar Jonathan Pennington is the word flourishing, which is an interesting idea as well. Ultimately, Jesus seems to be saying that such people as described in the Beatitudes are on the right track. These are the people who are actually going to receive the eternal realities that they're pursuing. They will receive the kingdom of heaven. They will be comforted. They will be filled, etc., etc. So as a result, these are the real heroes. They are the people whose lives are to be looked at and, in a sense, copied. They are to be envied in a way. Famous British preacher of the 20th century, David Martin Lloyd-Jones, says that these are the people who are to be congratulated because they're winning the race, in a sense. And yet these characteristics are largely not praised by our culture. And I would add, most of the characteristics Jesus describes in the Beatitudes are often not praised even in the American church. We don't tend to value meekness or the desire to live righteously or peacemaking. Rather, the culture tends to thumb its nose at such things. This is why Dallas Willard, in his book, The Divine Conspiracy, calls this paradoxical nature of the way the Beatitudes relate to our culture, he calls this God-based inversion. It's when the values of the kingdom break into our existence that we begin to notice that they look and they sound completely foreign to us. And yet, Jesus is clearly indicating the way to us in his teaching here. 2 ideas that I want to just mention in closing. One, I don't think that Jesus is necessarily talking about 9 different groups of people here, so much as he's describing 9 different character traits that characterize someone who is a part of God's kingdom. So don't necessarily try to find yourself in one of these groups, but rather ask, how do I pursue things like mercy and purity of heart now? And second, in answer to that question, we pursue such things by looking to Christ. Jesus is the personification of the lived values of God's kingdom. He's not simply the teacher, he's also the example. So when we're trying to figure out what spiritual poverty or mourning or persecution looks like, we only have to look to Christ and to his example. And it is through looking to him, through placing our faith in his divine blessedness, that we also become blessed.